Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. Arabic and Persian, two very different languages with two very different origins and backgrounds. To explain the relationship between the two languages, I will turn instead, initially, to French and English, and you will see why in just a bit. Old English is a very different language from modern English. For that matter, Old English is a very different language than Middle English. Middle English and modern English are not very different. In fact, if you take a few hours, maybe 4 or 5 hours, to study the ways in which letters were written differently in Middle English and make a few minor modifications, you can learn Middle English relatively quickly. So I would argue that even making a distinction between Middle English and modern English may be somewhat misleading. Maybe they should be called the same thing or different stages of the same thing. I mean, we consider Elizabethan English, like Shakespeare, the King James or authorized version of the Bible, to be a part of modern English. So why do we make an exception with Middle English? I don't know. I am not a linguist. I'm sure a linguist could answer that question for you, but I will not try. I will leave it there and just say that to me, Middle English and modern English should be seen as basically the same language. Old English should not. Why is that? Old English was a purely Germanic language, purely Germanic. Now, in a way, you can say that so was modern English. It's Germanic. The structure of English is Germanic. For example, in English, you generally put the adjectives before the nouns. In French, on the other hand, unless you're talking about one syllable adjectives, the adjectives go after the nouns. So it's different, and the way that the words are used and structured. French has something called the passé composé, which is a literary past, which is an extremely confusing past tense. As somebody who studied French, I always had difficulty, and I'm not alone, with the passé composé. We have no passé composé in English, and as far as I know, we never did. We only have one past tense. So again, French and English, whether Old English, Middle English, or Modern English, are distinct in terms of their structure. The structure is very different, and it is the structure which basically underlies what a language is and allows one to distinguish it from another language. The vocabulary is secondary. It does not matter all that much because you can learn vocabulary relatively easily once you have learned the structure. Okay. The Norman Conquest, the invasion of France into England, which has still left some hard feelings in the minds of some people in England, and for some odd reason has left some hard feelings in the minds of some Americans. I remember after 9/11, when the French would not agree with the American idea, that that Iraq was involved in 9/11, he said that we should stop calling French fries in the congressional cafeteria and start calling them freedom fries. And it worked. He convinced people in the cafeteria to change the name of French fries to freedom fries. The good thing about that guy, I most likely would not agree with him on most things, but I'm happy and I'm pleased with what he did. He admitted his mistake. After it became apparent that the United States was wrong, that Iraq did not have weapons of mass destruction. He apologized to the French. He apologized to them. Now, where did the United States get the Statue of Liberty from? From France. What was the first country to recognize the United States after the Revolutionary War? Again, France. So I don't see why that resentment toward the French by English has carried over into the United States. But for whatever reason, and I don't know what that is, it has. It has. And I think most people are aware of that kind of bigotry that exists among many Americans toward people who speak French. And I say that as somebody who is a francophile, as somebody who loves French. And I find it very disconcerting whenever I run into somebody who is bigoted against either the French personally or the French language. Okay, so the Norman Conquest forever changed the shape of English. English, which was a Germanic language, a purely Germanic language, now became a mix of a Germanic structure with many German words, many Germanic words, but also many French words. So the short words generally were retained as French or were accepted as French, but the long words were replaced with their French equivalents. That is where we get the concept of four-letter words or profanities or vulgarities. When the Norman Conquest took place, it became seen as appropriate or dignified, maybe arrogant, to use the French words and to stop using the Old English words. That was the beginning of Middle English. It was only the lowlifes, the peasants, who used the old German words. And so it does not make any sense to call those old German words, like four-letter words, profanities. Does it make sense to call them vulgarities? I guess you can, because vulgarity just means low, and that is a description of the status of those words. I think it's unfortunate. I wish that were not the case. I wish that those so-called four-letter words were not four-letter words, if you know what I mean. But I have no control over that. That's one of the relics of English language history, that concept developed, even though I wish it had not developed. So, Middle English, although it looks like Old English, meaning the letters look very similar, is nothing like Old English, because Middle English incorporated all of those new French words that were used by a sophisticated English speaker, and eventually were used by everyone, eventually, over time. The same thing is true with modern English. There is very little difference between Middle English and modern English. In fact, if you have a day to kill, you can learn how to read modern Middle English. You can learn how to read it. Speak it, I don't know. Understand it verbally, I don't know what it sounds like, so I can't tell you that. But read it. Write it, I don't know either, but certainly read it. It is not hard for a modern English speaker in the 21st century to read Old English. I'm sorry, Middle English. Not hard to read Middle English. Middle English is virtually identical to modern English. Neither of them are identical or virtually identical to Old English. So as I see it, Middle English and modern English should not be seen really as two separate languages, but as two stages of the same language. In fact, I would call Middle English early modern English. And just as we consider Elizabethan English to be modern English, like Shakespearean English, King James English, then why not consider Middle English to be early modern English and Elizabethan or Shakespearean English to be maybe middle modern English or something like that? That's what I would personally prefer. But nobody listens to me and nobody should listen to me. I am not a linguist. I'm only trying to explain this to the best of my ability, and I hope I am not confusing everyone. Okay, so what happens again is through the Norman conquest, English was entirely reshaped. And so we have all of these French words that fill up the dictionary. Webster's Dictionary, Oxford Dictionary, whatever, Random House Dictionary, words that at one time were not a part of the English language, but now are. So the longer words in modern English tend to be French. The shorter words tend to be German, and some of them are vulgarities or profanities. Sadly, but they are. So let's take that and use that as a way of understanding the relationship between Persian and Arabic, or the similarities and differences between Persian and Arabic. The origins of Persian and Arabic are entirely different. Persian is an Indo-European language, like English and French. Arabic is a Semitic language, like Hebrew and Amharic. They are two different languages from two entirely different sources. For example, let's start with Persian. The Persian word for new is no. No. N-A-W. No. It is a cognate. It means new. The Persian word for brow, as in your eyebrow, brow, is abru. Abru. In Sanskrit, it's even closer. It's bru. Why? Because both Persian and Sanskrit are, like English and French, Indo-European languages. And so inevitably, you are going to see a lot of cognates between English and Persian. So what happened? What happened to Persian? Well, Persian was modified by Arabic. When the Arabs invaded Iran, they brought obviously their language with them. And so all of a sudden, these Arabic words filled the vocabulary of Persian-speaking individuals. And so Persian was suddenly transformed into basically a new language. It was not the same as the language which had existed prior to the invasion of the Arabs into Iran. And of course, the primary reason why the Arabs went into Iran was to spread the religion of Islam, not to spread the language of Arabic, but inevitably the language of Arabic came with them. Just like when the French invaded England in the Norman conquest, they were not intending to spread their language, they were intending to conquer England. But with that came the spread of French and French words into the English language. So, modern Persian. The structure of modern Persian is basically an Indo-European structure, like the structure of English and the structure of French. The structure of Arabic is a Semitic construction or structure, like the structure of Arabic or Amharic. Two very different structures. When Arabic words began to spread into Iran, because Persian speakers did not have certain words in their language. They changed the pronunciations. They changed the pronunciations. Bad guys, aren't they? No. They changed the pronunciations. For example, in Arabic, there are several different letters which can be called types of T's. In Arabic, they are all pronounced differently. One example of a T is the th sound, as in, well, as in th. And so there is no th sound in Persian. Why? Because before the Arabs went into Iran, Persian had no th sound. So when th words were brought into Iran, they were pronounced like T words. And so it doesn't matter which T letter you have, they are all pronounced the same in Persian, but they are pronounced differently in Arabic. So that is the result, or an example, I guess, of how Persian and Arabic should be regarded as distinct languages. Now, I say that for a reason. There are many people who have argued that modern-day Persian is simply a dialect of Arabic. It's mostly people who speak Arabic who say that, not people who speak Persian. And that is wrong. That is simply wrong. Persian is not a dialect of Arabic. It does have a lot of Arabic words, but they're not pronounced the same. The structure is not the same. And there's also a large Persian vocabulary, which is not used in Arabic. And so thinking of them as being the same is really, really, really misleading because they're not the same. Okay, now, in terms of the differences in the ways in which Arabic and Persian can be used, those are also different. Arabic is a very technical language, but it is also a language which in some ways can be seen as rather vague. It is vague to me. As somebody who studies Arabic and Persian, as best I can, the words rather, are vague. So you can have one Arabic word, and it can be translated into English in multiple ways. And some of those ways might even be contradictory. So how do you know how to translate that Arabic word into English? By its context. Without context, you have no knowledge of how to translate Arabic into English. When many Muslims say that you cannot really translate the Quran into English, they are right. Why? Because English and Arabic are so different, so different. They are both technical languages, but they are technical in two entirely different ways. English has the largest vocabulary of any language on the face of the earth. Arabic does not. You can say something with extreme precision in English. Just one word can express something with extreme precision. Does that mean that context is unimportant in English? No. Context is important, especially with some words. But in Arabic, it's important with almost every single word, which can make learning Arabic for somebody who is not familiar with how Semitic languages are used very, very difficult. Fortunately, in my case, my second language was Hebrew. Does that make me a fluent speaker of Hebrew? No. I never spoke Hebrew fluently, but I've always known Hebrew. At least basically I could read Hebrew. So when I picked up a book in Arabic and learned the letters, which despite appearances is a very easy thing to do, it looks like, when you look at Arabic, it looks like scribbles. That's how it looked to me, scribbles. But they're not scribbles. They are actual letters. And once you learn how the letters look, you can easily read them, and pronounce them. You may not know what they mean, but Arabic, unlike English, is pronounced exactly the way it is spelled. That makes it really easy to pronounce Arabic words. So that's an advantage that Arabic has. Similar to Hebrew, by the way, because Hebrew words are also pronounced the way they are written. That is true of Semitic languages in general, because of the way that they're structured and the way in which their vocabulary has been developed. So there's a lot of shared vocabulary between Hebrew and Arabic, just as there is a lot of shared vocabulary between English and French. So Arabic, a very technical language, useful because you can speak about things with a great deal of specificity. In Persian, not so much. Persian is very different. Does that make one language better than the other? No, of course not. They are both wonderful languages. One is not better than the other. They both have extensive value, and I think that they both should be learned and studied. And when you learn and study them and compare them with one another, you will see what I'm talking about, that they are both valid and valuable languages, even though they fulfill very different purposes. Persian, unlike Arabic, is not really a technical language. It is more of a poetic language. Why? Here is why. Because in Persian, the syntax of a sentence, meaning the word structure of a sentence, is not fixed. So I can say, I looked at my dog, right? I can also say, dog my looked at. Dog my looked at. What does dog my looked at mean in English, right? Makes no sense. Dog my looked at. You can change the order of words in a sentence to a degree, not completely, but to a degree, and the sentence will still be the same as the original version. You're not changing the definition or the meaning of what you're expressing. You're simply changing the syntax. But since syntax is important in Arabic, but it's not important in Persian, or not as important in Persian, that means that you can switch the words around. Persian is a much more flexible language than Arabic, which makes it very poetic, because you can change the words around and make them rhyme. Oftentimes, say when I write a poem in English, it's hard to do that because you can't change the structure of sentences that much without confusing the reader. And so you have to spend a long time coming up with a sentence that makes sense. The order makes sense. In Persian, that difficulty does not exist to the same extent because of the flexibility of Persian syntax. By changing the word order, you are not changing what you are saying. You can express the same thing even by altering or playing around with the word order. So again, even though Persian, modern Persian, has a lot of Arabic in it, it has still retained its original Persian structure, its flexible syntax. Arabic does not have a flexible syntax. Take my word for it. Arabic, like English, does not have a flexible syntax. Persian does. In fact, I am not aware, I'm sure there is one, but I am not aware of any other language with a syntax as flexible as Persian. It is a wonderful language and a beautiful language. It sounds really, really nice. I mean, when you look at the letters basically are Arabic letters with 3 additions to compensate for the fact that there are 3 sounds in Persian, which do not exist in Arabic, and so you have to add those additional letters. But other than that, it's basically the same script, and it's usually written in the same style. So if you speak Arabic, you can basically read or pronounce Persian as long as you know those 3 additional letters. If you speak Persian, you can also basically read Arabic. Most likely, you will not be able to understand it, except for the occasional word here and there, but it's different. So, in other words, Persian retained its Persianness because it was Arabic that came into Persian, that invaded Persian. I'm being sarcastic when I say invaded, but it infiltrated Persian, not the other way around. So it was Persian that adapted, but it did not really change. It simply stayed the way it was and incorporated the additional Arabic words into its basic structure. Hopefully that was clear. This has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.